Hey folks, it's Dave. Welcome to the basement. So today I want to talk about part of my collection that I haven't talked about before, but is a significant part and a growing part, and one that I'm really passionate about, and that's the 7-inch single. And I know that gets a lot of kind of disdain in the vinyl community, just because honestly it is. It's a pain. You got to get up off the couch every 2 or 3 minutes and flip the record. But if you kind of exclude these from your collection, you're going to miss a lot of good music, in my opinion anyway. There's a lot of bands that have B-sides that never made it on an album. They never made it on a comp or any of these box set anthologies. So if you're kind of a completist, you want to hear everything that your favorite band has done, you're going to have to pick up a 7-inch. Especially during the 60s, there were bands that all they released were singles. They never released an album. And some of those have compilations, but they don't really include everything. And if you're an OCD completist like I am, you're going to want those singles. And then in the 90s, the same sort of thing with a lot of punk bands. All they put out was a single or two, and maybe it had 3 or 4 songs per record, but still never released an album. And the only way you're going to get that in your collection, the way you're going to have that music physically in your collection, is picking up the 7-inch. So I'm going to start showing some of these, and hopefully I'm also going to do some needle drops and see if YouTube decides they want to kick me off. And if not, then win-win for everybody. All right. So first up is a band that was pretty popular here locally in Detroit called Adrenaline. They didn't really make it big nationally. They kind of brushed with success. They had a song, 86 maybe, that was on one of the Iron Eagle soundtracks, which, terrible movie, but decent soundtracks. It had Queen on there. I think Brittany Fox was even on one of the 2 soundtracks, Eagle 1 or Eagle 2. I don't know. Anyway, so that's as close as they came to fame, or national fame anyway. And they originally started out releasing this single here in 1977 on Fiddler's Music. This is Comes and Goes, and back with Rock and Roll Screamer. And Fiddler's Music was a local Detroit label based out of Fiddler's Music Company, which was a music store that had a studio in the back and released a few bands on their private label. And so yeah, this, however, is not one of those OG copies. This is a reissue by Sing Sing. And cool thing is they recreated the logo and everything of the original Fiddler's Music, but again, just a reissue, but still nice to have. Anyway, so on this 7-inch, they don't have, whereas they became much more of a AOR, maybe even power pop band later in the 80s. This is totally different sound for the band. So this is another example of why if you ignore the 7 inches, you're not going to get that whole breadth of the band's history. So the first track, Comes and Goes, is pretty much a decent, upbeat, kind of a barroom boogie rock sort of song, which it's not bad. It's enjoyable, but it's definitely different from their later work. The B-side, however, my favorite track on there, the Rock and Roll Screamer. I mean, it's definitely got that garage rock core. You can certainly hear hints of an MC5 influence. It's got some great guitar solos in it. Much more of a high energy rock song than you would get from the band as they progressed in their career. They would also add saxophone after this release. I think on their next single, the sax is involved. So again, they're changing their sound. So this is at the core is where they began. The only thing I don't dig about this is the production is really, really muddy. Not sure if that was, and again, I haven't listened to an OG copy, so I'm not sure if that was part of the actual studio recording, or that was poor, or if this, whatever they used to reissue, was just a crap copy. I don't know. But what we're going to do is we're going to listen to a little bit of Rock and Roll Screamer, and you can hear for yourself what it sounds like. And yeah, here you go. So let's check it out. right, next up is one of those bands that I was talking about that released just one single and disappeared. And this is a Scottish band called A Girl Called Johnny. And they took their name from a Waterboy song, I think it came out in 1983. The song was a tribute to Patti Smith. And so yeah, this is a Scottish sort of a new romantic sort of band. Fiona Morrison is the singer. And I think it's got one of the guys from the Bluebells in it. I can't remember his name now. But anyway, so yeah, they released this single in 1986 on 10 Records. And it was only released in the UK. And I actually had to buy this from a seller in the UK. So yeah, online purchase. But anyway, how else am I going to get it? So yeah, Hello It Isn't Me is the A side, and it's like I said, kind of a melodic, new romantic sort of song. Very atmospheric, synth and guitar. Shallow, which is side B, is much more upbeat, more jangle to the guitars. I really had a hard time picking a favorite out of these two, and it's kind of surprising why they didn't do better than they actually did. Like I said, this was it. As far as I know, none of these songs charted anywhere, and the band just sort of fell apart. But let's take a listen to Shallow, the B side, and let me know what you think. All right, and back to Detroit this time. This is, again, the only release from a band called 6 Feet Deep. And this is Sludge, and that's the A side, and is backed with a Fish song. This came out in 1992 on Anti-Music Records, which was another local label. Ferndale, I believe, is where it came from. Yeah, Ferndale, suburb of Detroit. And yeah, literally there's no information about this band like anywhere. The only thing you get is what's on here. It was recorded in 91, came out in, I think, 92. Did I say 92? I don't know. On Anti-Music Records. So yeah, it's interesting. It's the music here reminds me a lot of maybe a less funky Infectious Grooves, if that makes sense to you. And I say that primarily because the A side is it's got this, it's thrashy punk, and it has this cool bass riff that it opens with. There's melodic bridges throughout. Is the bass. The bass is very prominent throughout, and that's primarily what reminds me of Infectious Grooves. It's just got that same kind of slightly funky bass, not as funky as Infectious Grooves, as I said, but it's still very similar. I think it'll remind you too if you think about it. Side B is a lot more noisy than A side. The A side Sludge was much more melodic, if it, I don't know if that's the right word, but it definitely is more listenable, I guess. Side B, a lot noisier, more of a grungy punk than a thrashy punk, still bass heavy. Let's listen to the A side on this one. Let's listen to Sludge and see what you think. Infectious Grooves? here's an example of a B-side that's a non-album B-side for a major artist. You're not going to get this anywhere. First, I don't think you're going to get this anywhere else. I don't know. I didn't browse through all the compilations and best of or whatever. But this is from 1989. This is from the Eurythmics, Don't Ask Me Why, backed with Rich Girl. And like I said, came out in 1989 on Arista. And the A-side is from the Eurythmics 1989 album, We Too Are One. Yeah, I think there's We Too Are One, which I don't have in the collection. Surprisingly enough, that's something I'm gonna have to pick up. But anyway, so yeah, this the A-side is pretty enjoyable. It was the only hit single from this album. I think it reached number 40 on the Billboard chart. But other than that, I think there were 3 other singles that were released on this album. None of them charted. So there's that. And Rich Girl, of course, like I said, was the B-side, or is the B-side, wasn't released. But, you know, of the two, while I thought that Don't Ask Me Why was pretty good, it was enjoyable, I thought the B-side was probably the better of the 2 tracks. It's got this strong bass synth, some nice piano accents, definitely danceable. I could see this getting airplay. Not sure if it did. I don't recall even hearing the Don't Ask Me Why. But anyway, at the time. So definitely think this could have at least entered the charts, but you know, who knows how that goes. It's kind of sultry as well. Let's take a listen. Finally today we have Under the Covers by Phoenix Thunderstone, and this came out in 2000 on Transparent Records. And so Phoenix Thunderstone was a sort of shock punk band from San Francisco. Probably best claim to fame is they featured on drums Vagmore from the Dwarves. And this was the band's very last release. I think they released 4, maybe 5 albums throughout their career, handful of singles, and this one came out a couple of years after their last album, and neither of these tracks are on any of the albums. It was released on white vinyl, limited to 100 copies. I think there's a black vinyl release also, maybe 900 copies. Anyway, so as the title alludes, this is an album of, or not an album, a single of 2 cover songs. And this is just a little bit of Transparent Records swag that came along with it. So the first on side A is Get Rhythm, a cover of a Johnny Cash tune, which is probably the most enjoyable out of the 2. Not saying that's a lot. Just wait and you'll hear what I'm talking about. And the second one, when I actually came across this, I was really excited about. It's a cover of Adamant's Goody Two Shoes, which I like that song, and I thought, well, okay, this is going to be interesting. Yeah, it's not that good. It's first of all, it's like really frantic. So it's still got that same sort of rhythm core that Goody Two Shoes has. You can still kind of hear that, but it's just like insane. So I don't know. I just thought it was crap. But we'll give a listen to Get Rhythm, the A side, and see what you think. Not really familiar with the original, so to me, I mean, it was enjoyable. Maybe if you're a Johnny Cash fan, you're just gonna want to burn this, but I don't know. Here, let's try it out. All right, so just a handful of 45s this time around. Hopefully the needle drops made it through the sensors and you got a chance to listen to these and it's maybe sparked some interest. Let me know if you've heard these before, if you've got them in your collection, if they're interesting, if you hate them. Leave me a comment, let me know. I'd love to talk about them. And while you're at it, why not hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and maybe give a like to the video. I'd appreciate that. And until next time, take care.